drop 40 with a left hand, and then we'll talk.
Larry Bird is at the center of another NBA debate after Pat Beverly made comments that many fans viewed as disrespectful toward Bird's legacy. What started as a simple comparison between two legendary scorers quickly turned into a much bigger conversation, with fans and former players weighing in on whether Beverly had gone too far. The debate began in late August on Beverly's podcast, where the discussion turned to a familiar question in basketball circles: Kevin Durant or Larry Bird? Beverly shared his opinion, but his comments immediately caught attention because of the way he compared the two stars and the reaction they triggered across the basketball community. Before long, fans began pushing back, while former players such as Eddie Johnson and Jalen Rose also became part of the wider conversation. What could have been another routine NBA comparison suddenly turned into a heated argument about Bird's place in basketball history, the standards used to judge different eras, and whether modern stars should really be compared to legends from previous generations. And now the biggest question is whether Larry Bird actually responded to Beverly, or whether the backlash from fans and former players became the real answer.
And if Kevin Durant was playing when Larry Bird was playing, he would average 50.
Nobody was averaging 50.
Kevin Durant would have been.
Kevin Durant's one of my favorite players of all time, but I know...
Within minutes, the clip had taken over social media, and within a few hours, it seemed like everyone had an opinion. Comment sections quickly became battlegrounds, with one side presenting Kevin Durant's advanced numbers, scoring efficiency, and three-point shooting, while the other side responded with Larry Bird's MVP awards, championships, and legendary performances from the 1980s. What began as a player comparison quickly became something much bigger, turning into an argument between old-school and modern basketball fans, traditional toughness and modern skill, and even the different styles of trash talk from different generations. At the center of it all was Pat Beverly, a former NBA role player whose comments had somehow triggered a massive debate about one of basketball's greatest legends. To understand why the reaction was so intense, you also have to understand Beverly's career and personality. He was never known as a superstar scorer. After being drafted in the second round in 2009, Beverly took an unconventional route to the NBA, playing professionally overseas in countries including Ukraine, Greece, and Russia before eventually earning his opportunity with the Houston Rockets. His reputation was built around defense, intensity, and getting under the skin of some of the league's biggest stars. His battles with players such as Russell Westbrook became part of his identity, and throughout his NBA career, he became known as the type of player who would relentlessly challenge opponents and bring an edge to every matchup. Beverly eventually played for several teams, including Houston, the Clippers, Minnesota, the Lakers, Chicago, and Philadelphia, but the role remained familiar: bring energy, defend aggressively, and make life uncomfortable for the opposition. That personality eventually followed him from the court to the microphone. In 2022, Beverly joined Barstool Sports and launched the Pat Bev podcast with Roan, giving him a platform where he could express his opinions without the restrictions of a traditional player interview. Instead of softening his personality behind the microphone, Beverly leaned into the same outspoken style that had defined his playing career. That is why his comments tend to create such strong reactions. His influence today comes less from what he did on the stat sheet and more from the conversations he creates with his opinions. And this kind of controversy is hardly new for Beverly. Anyone who has followed his career knows that he has never been afraid to say something provocative, and some of his previous comments have sparked controversy long before the Bird versus Durant debate ever began.
We got Jared Allen.
Why? Just because he likes anime?
I mean, okay.
Just because he has sweet sideburns?
You asked, you didn't make...
No, I didn't ask.
Just loud and wrong every time. In the era of player podcasts, where ex-players are turning mics into media empires, Pat Bev plays a specific role: music, the disruptor. While guys like that is exactly why commentators like J.J. Redick and Draymond Green have often tried to remind fans that Pat Beverly has built his entire public identity around creating chaos and sparking reactions. His controversial opinions are part of his lane, and when he said Kevin Durant was better than Larry Bird, many people didn't simply hear a basketball opinion. They saw another example of Beverly doing what he does best: creating a debate guaranteed to generate clicks, comments, and reaction videos. But this time, bringing Larry Bird into the conversation opened a much bigger can of worms, because Bird was not just another legendary player from the past. He was one of the toughest competitors the NBA had ever seen, and his reputation was built on far more than statistics. When people remember Bird, they remember moments that seemed almost impossible. During the 1984 Finals, for example, Bird helped lead Boston to the championship after the Celtics had suffered a difficult loss and needed a response. He challenged his teammates publicly, then backed up his words on the court and finished the series with a performance worthy of Finals MVP. Years later, Bird showed that same toughness in the playoffs when he suffered a frightening injury, left the court, and then returned to the game despite the pain, giving the Boston crowd another unforgettable moment. To understand why Bird became such a legend, you also have to remember where his story began. He came from French Lick, Indiana, a tiny town far removed from the spotlight and basketball media machine that surrounds young stars today. There was no massive social media following or non-stop national coverage pushing his name. Bird simply developed his game through relentless work and eventually turned Indiana State into a national basketball story, leading the school to the 1979 championship game against Magic Johnson and Michigan State. Magic won that matchup, but the rivalry that began that night would eventually become one of the defining stories in NBA history. When Bird entered the NBA with Boston, the Celtics were coming off a disappointing season and had won only 29 games. Then everything changed. Bird immediately transformed the team, helping Boston jump to 61 wins during his rookie season and establishing himself as the foundation of a championship contender. From there, he became one of the defining players of the 1980s, winning 3 championships, 3 consecutive MVP awards, and earning 12 All-Star selections. But Bird's greatness was never only about trophies. His basketball intelligence separated him from almost everyone else. He could read the floor several steps ahead, anticipate where teammates would move, manipulate defenders with his eyes, and turn small mistakes into easy opportunities. He could score, rebound, pass, and control the game without relying on elite athleticism. Teammates often described how Bird seemed to know exactly where they would be before they even made their move, and he could deliver passes directly into their shooting pockets. If they missed an opportunity, however, they could expect Bird to let them hear about it immediately. By the time he retired in 1992, Bird had built a resume that placed him firmly among the greatest players ever. Championships, MVPs, all-star appearances, legendary playoff moments, and an unmistakable competitive mentality had already secured his place in NBA history. And then there was that famous statement Bird once made about his left hand, a comment that perfectly captured the confidence that made him Larry Bird.
He can't guard. He literally can't guard.
Chris Paul can't guard anybody?
No, he can't. Everyone knows that. What we call them? Cone. You know what you do with cones? You make a move. What does the cone do?
Stay still.
Exactly. Yeah. He's a cone.
That wasn't some exaggerated story created to make Bird look tougher than he was. It actually happened, and it remains one of the wildest examples of Larry Bird's unbelievable confidence. He didn't just talk like he was the best, he had the skill and track record to back up those words, which is exactly what made his trash talk so intimidating.
Didn't Bird shoot left-handed for an entire game against Portland?
Scoring 47 points. You're especially using your left hand.
Oh.
Back in 1986, Larry Bird produced one of the most ridiculous performances of his career when he faced the Portland Trail Blazers and reportedly decided to play primarily with his left hand because he wanted to save his right hand for the Lakers. And somehow, this wasn't a joke or casual practice stunt. Bird went out and finished with 47 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists, recording a triple-double while relying heavily on his weaker hand. Imagine an NBA superstar attempting something like that in a meaningful game today. The internet would completely explode. Bird, however, treated it like another day at the office and then followed it by taking care of the Lakers shortly afterward. That story is exactly why Beverly's comparison sparked such a strong reaction from Bird supporters. Kevin Durant is unquestionably one of the greatest scorers of his generation, but Bird's greatness was built on a completely different level of versatility, confidence, and competitive control. Durant became a scoring champion at a remarkably young age and eventually won multiple championships and finals MVPs, establishing himself as one of the most difficult players of the modern era to defend. But Bird entered the NBA at a time when the game was far more physical, and he immediately became the centerpiece of a struggling Boston Celtics team rather than simply joining an established championship machine. When Bird arrived in Boston in 1979, the Celtics had won only 29 games the previous season. 1 year later, they had jumped to 61 wins, and Bird had transformed the entire direction of the franchise. That is an important part of the Bird versus Durant argument, because Bird wasn't simply entering a perfect situation, he became the reason the situation changed. Durant's career, meanwhile, has included stops in Oklahoma City, Golden State, Brooklyn, and Phoenix, with some of those teams already containing significant talent and championship-level infrastructure. That doesn't diminish Durant's accomplishments, but it does create a different context.
And he's at 87% and 6th in the league right now.
Then there was the legendary three-point contest moment, another perfect example of Bird's unbelievable confidence. Before the competition had even started, Bird reportedly walked into the locker room and looked around at the other contestants as if the result had already been decided. Instead of wondering who would win, he was essentially asking everyone else who was going to finish second. That wasn't empty bravado. It was Bird letting everyone know exactly how confident he was before he even picked up a basketball. And then he went out and backed up the attitude, turning the contest into another unforgettable chapter in his growing legend. The story has been told countless times, but it never loses its impact because it captures exactly what made Larry Bird so intimidating. Before one of the legendary three-point contests, Bird reportedly walked into the locker room, looked at the other shooters, and confidently asked who was going to finish second. He wasn't making a casual joke. He genuinely believed the competition was already his. Then he stepped onto the court and backed up the confidence, knocking down the shots he needed and celebrating before the final ball had even dropped. That moment perfectly represented Bird's mentality. His greatest weapon wasn't simply his shooting ability, it was the confidence and basketball intelligence behind it. Bird had an uncanny ability to read opponents, anticipate what was coming, and make them feel like he already knew how the possession would end. Magic Johnson, who battled Bird for years, understood that better than almost anyone. Their rivalry lasted nearly a decade, and Magic often emphasized that Bird's mind was just as dangerous as his jumper. Bird could be talking trash, reading the defense, directing a teammate, and planning his next move all at the same time. That combination of skill, confidence, and mental control is what turned ordinary possessions into moments that opponents remembered for the rest of their careers.